to was the words that I actually used. And I tried to make those words the sort of words that the person who's learned English, not as their first language, but as a second language. So they would typically build up a vocabulary of 2 or 3 or 4,000 words. Now, a good fluent English speaker might well have vocabulary of 7,000 words or more. If you're heavily into words, there's an almost infinite number of words that you can have. So one can use words like being didactic and all that sort of stuff, being a thaumaturge. But these words are meaningless to most people, even English people. So what I try and do, because I'm very cognizant of working with people internationally, is try and restrict my conversation to that subset of a few thousand words that hopefully they will have learned at school and subsequently through their involvement in the world, the English-speaking world. Just another thought on language. People for whom English is their natural language have a huge advantage in that they can go anywhere and generally be understood by educated people. But at the same time, they need to be mindful of how they use their language, and certainly not smug, because the people that they meet will very often speak 2, 3, 4, even 5 languages, and they will speak those languages well. So I think when I see English business people calling somebody else thick, when they've had a conversation with them without even thinking that that person is actually talking a foreign language, what I try to do is not fall into that trap. I respect that the people are listening to me, if I'm lucky, and they're having to translate in their minds from the language I'm using, to some extent, into their home language. And that does mean I can't use what's called idiomatic language. I have to be mindful. If I use a phrase like, you can take a horse to water, but you cannot make it drink, that won't have much meaning in a lot of countries. In some countries, you have to be very careful what words you use so you don't give offense. So if you're in the Middle East and you make jokes about targeting a certain customer, they tend to think you might be actually thinking of shooting at them rather than just selecting them as a focus of attention. If you make jokes about camels and so on, some people take deep offense because their societies have gone well beyond camels, and now they're driving around the desert in Humvees or God knows what all else. So I try and be very careful with the words I use, and I hope I've got it right. But when I do use a word that's perhaps outside a lot of people's vocabulary, I try to give an explanation of what it means at the same time. And I do it because sometimes it's not a bad thing to help people extend their vocabularies. It's another aspect of learning. But I don't do it in any kind of smug way. I just do it to ease the communication process. So I hope you'll understand the setting, what I'm trying to achieve through the words I use, and the style that I use, where I try not to be the clever guy and keep that balance. But don't be fooled. I genuinely believe I know what I'm talking about, and I'm trying to take Corbyn down a path, thankfully because he has an interest. So it's down this path, which is a path to help him decide his goals and develop the capability and have the knowledge to be able to achieve them and live a happy life. And that's what's fundamental to this whole thing. How I prompt Corbyn to look at external resources, because we live in a world where there's so much external information available. We mustn't let it swamp us, but at the same time, we can take advantage of it. So having said all that, I really do encourage you, start watching the dialogues, start making your own notes, start thinking about yourself. Try and put yourself in Corbyn's place. And it's not just a passive process of you watching and possibly even being slightly entertained. This needs to be an active process on your part. And if you aren't making notes, if you aren't doing background research, if you aren't trying to apply the techniques, then quite frankly, you're wasting your time, and you might as well go and watch a cat fall down a toilet, or whatever it is that does it for you on YouTube. So, party on. Thank you. We shall move forward. Bye-bye. The soft skills part of it is it gives you the skills to control that interaction between those people and yourself. So it's called interpersonal, which means between two people, and dynamics, which basically is about action and movement and change, because a dynamic system is a moving and changing system. So interpersonal dynamics and soft skills. That's what we're going for. If we can, I'd like to help you master enough skills so that you will be able to interact with the world in a way that's consistent with what you want and help you move forward through your life in a happy way. It's a big aspiration because it's not really taught very much in the society around you. It's not really understood very much. And I would say 99% of people live what I would call an unconscious life. They are not aware of many, many aspects of what's going on around them, especially the pressures that are on them. And they respond because they're unconscious of what's going on. They respond to things in a way, in a pattern that they laid down for themselves by the time they were about 7 years old. And most people live their lives according to a script that, as they grew from maybe 4 through 7 years old, they built up a script of what is this world really all about? How should I behave? How can I get what I want? And they wrote that script for themselves in the environment of the family or the home or wherever they were living at that time. They laid it down, and as I say, about 99% of people live a life that they scripted for themselves by the time they were age 7. And that now is going to bring us on to the topic of learning. So I'm going to pause. At this point, I think I should make it clear, I'm not suggesting that you can consciously take over everything that your subconscious mind does and change it, because you can't. I would say there may be between 5 and 10% of what goes on in your mind that you can access more effectively. I'd also say that there's a great deal that goes on in your conscious mind that you can change, because conscious mind is much easier to change than subconscious mind. More thoughts of the sort that you would like to influence your behavior. So by putting the right thoughts into your subconscious, that very powerful superperson that is inside you and does control probably up to 90% of what you do, you will be empowering your subconscious as well as empowering your conscious mind. And that really comes into the whole topic of learning. We move forward and you watch the dialogues, is don't just think about the interpersonal dynamics between the two people that are talking, which in this case is myself and Corbyn. Think about what I'm trying to do in terms of influence Corbyn's self-talk, because that's what this interaction between your conscious and your unconscious mind is called. I am trying to educate and modify his self-talk to increase its effectiveness and pretty much unleash, and I think unleash is an adequate word, unleash the power that it is within his subconscious so that he becomes far more effective, far more capable. And also, the byproduct of all that is as he sees how much more effective he is, he will gain in personal confidence. And that's what we're going for. That's the big prize. Thanks.